outlook on life has changed just by hearing that there's evidence that completely exonerates this man of the crime of killing the president. Now, I'm not saying that he is not involved. I believe he's involved, or else why would he be there? But I don't know. I really believe, though, that he didn't kill the president. And my whole life has been plagued by this idea that my father is the murderer of one of the most loved persons in the world. And if he's not responsible for that, then that means that a great part of the burden that I have to carry is gone.
Imagine being born with a name so toxic that your mother has to hide it from you for the first 7 years of your life. Imagine growing up thinking you're just like every other kid, until one day your mother sits you down on a green couch and tells you that your father didn't just leave you. He didn't just die. He allegedly killed the most beloved president in American history, and then was murdered on live television while the entire world watched. This is the story of June and Rachel Oswald, two women who never chose to be part of history, but who have spent their entire lives trying to escape from it. What happens when your father's 3 seconds of infamy become your lifetime of silence? What happens when you're born into a conspiracy that the world will never stop talking about, but you're not allowed to speak? November 22nd, 1963. A date that changed everything. But while the world mourned John F. Kennedy, two little girls lost something they didn't even know they had. June was 21 months old. Rachel was 33 days old. In the span of 48 hours, their father went from unknown ex-Marine to the most hated man in America to a corpse on a morgue table. And these two babies, who couldn't even walk or talk yet, became the daughters of an assassin. But here's what nobody talks about. They had no idea. Picture this scene. It's 1965, and a young Russian widow named Marina is standing in front of a mirror, adjusting her wedding dress. She's about to marry Kenneth Porter, an electronics worker who's promised to give her and her two little girls a normal life. Outside, helicopters circle overhead like vultures, because even her private moments of happiness have become public spectacle. The press has decided that Marina Oswald doesn't deserve to disappear. She doesn't deserve to heal. She doesn't deserve to protect her children from the nightmare that their lives have become. But Marina is determined to try. She moves her family to Richardson, Texas, then to the small town of Rockwall, hoping that distance and time will let them blend in. She gives her daughters a new last name, Porter, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she can erase the past. Every morning, she dresses June and Rachel like little dolls, making sure they look perfect, because, as June would later remember, her mother never knew when they'd run into someone, and she didn't want them looking like poor white trash. Think about what that means. A mother so terrified of judgment that she can't let her toddlers leave the house unless they're perfectly dressed. A mother who knows that every trip to the grocery store could turn into a spectacle, with strangers whispering and pointing and staring at her children like they're exhibits in a museum of American tragedy. And for a while, the plan works. June and Rachel grow up thinking they're normal kids with a normal family. They go to birthday parties, they play with friends, they have no idea that their mailbox gets shot at by random vandals, or that news crews sometimes follow their school bus. When other kids ask them about their daddy, they talk about Kenneth Porter, the man who reads them bedtime stories and takes them to school. But you can't hide from history forever, especially when your history is one of the most debated events of the 20th century. June is 9 years old, Rachel is 7, when Marina finally decides she can't keep lying to them. She sits them down on that big green couch and tells them the truth. The man they call Papa Kenneth isn't their real father. Their real father's name was Lee Harvey Oswald, and the world believes he killed President Kennedy. Can you imagine that moment? Being a child and suddenly realizing that all the weird things you've noticed, all the whispers you couldn't quite hear, all the strange looks from strangers, they all make sense now. You're not just different. You're the children of the most notorious assassin in American history. Rachel later said that finding out the truth was almost liberating, because finally all the puzzle pieces clicked into place. But it was also terrifying, because now she understood why reporters showed up at her house, why people stared at her family, why her mother was always so careful about everything they did. Even after learning the truth, the girls still didn't really understand what it meant. How could they? They were children living in a world where their father's name was mentioned in the same breath as words like betrayal, conspiracy, and murder. A world where every November the anniversary would come around, and their family would be thrust back into the spotlight whether they wanted it or not. High school brought new challenges. Rachel joined the cheerleading squad, thinking maybe she could just be a normal teenager. But during games, hecklers in the stands would yell things like, "Your daddy shot Kennedy," or "Good thing your daddy's dead and buried." Imagine trying to focus on a routine while strangers scream about your father's alleged crimes. Imagine trying to date when tabloids run headlines like, "Oswald kids don't have dogs or dates," painting you as some kind of friendless freak. June went to prom, and reporters literally showed up at their house that night. The National Enquirer appeared on their doorstep while she was trying to have one normal teenage moment. Think about that. You can't even go to prom without your father's ghost following you there. For decades, Marina protected her daughters by keeping them silent. No interviews, no public statements, no acknowledgement that Lee Harvey Oswald even had children. But by the 1990s, as conspiracy theories swirled and new books came out claiming to have solved the mystery, both June and Rachel realized they had their own questions that needed answers. In 1993, June appeared on The Today Show, her first and only major television interview. 30 years old, nervous but composed, she finally spoke the words the world had been waiting to hear. But what she said surprised everyone. She didn't declare her father innocent. She didn't claim he was guilty. Instead, she said something much more powerful. "I'll accept whatever the truth is." But here's the catch. She didn't believe the truth had been told yet. June wrote letters to Congress, pushed for the declassification of JFK assassination files, and made it clear that she suspected there was more to the story than one angry man with a rifle. This wasn't the desperate plea of a daughter trying to rehabilitate her father's image. This was the careful, measured statement of someone who had lived her entire life in the shadow of unanswered questions and finally decided she deserved to know what really happened. 2 years later, Rachel spoke to Texas Monthly, sharing her story publicly for the first time. She was working as a waitress while putting herself through nursing school, determined to build a life that had nothing to do with November 22nd, 1963. But even she couldn't escape the questions. She admitted she'd watched Oliver Stone's JFK and found the portrayal of her father surprisingly accurate. Like June, she didn't think Lee Harvey Oswald could have acted alone. Think about what it means that both daughters, raised separately from any conspiracy theories, raised by a mother who tried to keep them away from all of it, independently came to the conclusion that something didn't add up about their father's story. After those brief moments in the spotlight, both sisters disappeared back into private life. June married, had children, worked in office administration under an assumed name. When a co-worker discovered her identity and spread it around the office, June had to gather her team and ask them to keep her secret. Terrified that tabloids would find out about her sons and put them through the same hell she had endured. Rachel became a registered nurse, also married and had children, and like her sister, guards her privacy fiercely. Both women live quiet lives in Texas, raising their own families, trying to give their children what they never had. a normal childhood free from the weight of historical infamy. But the questions remain. Marina, their mother, eventually changed her mind about Lee's guilt, publicly stating by the 1990s that she believed he was framed. The last anyone saw of her was a tabloid photo from 2013, showing a woman in her 70s grocery shopping in a Dallas suburb. Just another grandmother trying to live in peace. Today, June and Rachel Oswald Porter are in their 60s. They've built lives, raised families, pursued careers, all while carrying a secret that most people can't even imagine. They're grandmothers now, probably watching their grandchildren play and wondering if they'll ever have to have the same conversation Marina had with them all those years ago on that green couch. What's remarkable isn't just that they survived growing up as the daughters of an alleged assassin. What's remarkable is that they emerged as thoughtful, grounded women who still want the truth, whatever it might be. They didn't retreat into denial or conspiracy theories. They didn't exploit their tragic fame for profit. They simply asked the same question that millions of Americans have been asking for 60 years. What really happened in Dallas? The assassination of JFK has generated thousands of books, dozens of movies, and countless theories. But at the center of it all are two women who never asked to be part of the story, who spent their childhoods not even knowing they were connected to it, and who have spent their adult lives trying to separate the man who was their father from the myth that the world created around him. Their story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about how we consume tragedy. We turn historical figures into villains and heroes, but we forget they were also husbands and fathers and human beings with families who have to live with the consequences of their actions forever. June and Rachel didn't choose to be born into infamy, but they've spent their entire lives proving that you don't have to be defined by the worst thing your parent ever did. In the end, their greatest achievement isn't that they survived growing up as Lee Harvey Oswald's daughters. It's that they became more than that. They became June and Rachel, mothers and professionals and private citizens who happen to carry one of history's most controversial surnames. They proved that even when you're born into someone else's nightmare, you can still choose to wake up and build your own dreams.